Thanks everyone for being here. I thought Richard was going to talk about the ransomware attack. We can get to that in a bit because I keep thinking there's still something that the consequences that we're dealing with every day. If not for the DNC hack, we wouldn't be having Donald Trump as the US president today. And to think that happened because somebody clicked on an email he or she was not supposed to. How does that make you feel? Is that the level of preparedness that you're seeing across the board?
100%. I mean, I think everybody's gotten a phishing email or had somebody who's gotten phished, et cetera. It's so common to me, it's every day of my life. I mean, I think you see it more than anybody.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think phishing is one of those things that's not going to go away, and it's an email and social. And a lot of people underappreciate how big it's gotten in the social side of the house as well. I mean, there's more messages now sent through social media than there is on email or text message globally. And so there's, if you think about compromising or attacking an individual or a business, there's two ways to get there: email or social media.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, anybody's gotten a fake email before is seen. It's so difficult to know who actually sends it to you, right? So, going back to the whole DNC Russian connection, there was some news actually came out today about analysis determining was Russia actually behind it or not. How do you know if Russia was behind it? And so even as enterprises, we don't know who's really hacking us, right? We don't know why they're doing it in many cases.
Well, the good thing is for most companies that does not matter who's attacking you. You get attacked, then you get attacked. But sometimes for me to think, I could click on something and bring down my entire TV network. I would love for you guys to be able to tell me there's a way for you to take that responsibility away from me. Is it possible?
I don't know about that. I think it's always going to be in your control because you have control of that computer, right? And that computer talks to other computers. And so it's a situation where I think most companies got to realize security isn't an event. You don't just go do it. You don't buy a technology to do it. It's something you have to continually do. You're defending yourself. And that concept of defense is what most enterprises don't communicate. You're constantly under attack. I think most people call it a needle in a haystack type problem. We're trying to find the attacker. Most companies are attacked so often it's a needle and needle stack issue. We're trying to find out which attacker's really the bad one versus just an annoyance.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Please.
Yeah, look, I think that's right. I think the challenge with attacks these days is there's a lot of noise that's out there. You hit on an interesting point about attribution. You get attacked so many times. Like, do you worry about who's attacking you, or do you worry about the attack itself and figure out how do I stop it? And I think a lot of organizations right now are still grasping with the fundamentals and the basics. What do I have to do? What are the basic building blocks that I need to have in place? And then if I am getting attacked at scale over and over and over again, how many resources should I dedicate to stopping that attack versus the next one and the next one? And so it becomes really more of an economical warfare type scenario. And like, I have a fixed amount of resources, and in theory, an infinite number of attacks is going to come. How do I apply the right resources to the right attack without spending too much? Because I think everybody in the security space is underfunded, has less resources than they'd like, and certainly less talent to go after the problem. And so,
yeah, I agree. I think actually everybody here that's at the conference, all the companies here, startups, et cetera, these are all entry points into enterprises, right? We're all consumers. So all the consumer apps we use, whatever it is, we bring them into the workplace. We've got our mobile phones, our laptops there, et cetera. So everybody here is a target just to be able to get into the enterprise spot where either the confidential data or money, when you're trying to steal money and launder that out and kind of deal with that, the attackers have to get into where the goods are first. And they'll do any mechanism possible, right? Everybody here is a walking target.
Well, but what are the solutions? I know we tell people not to, advertise for their companies and their products. But one thing I do know some companies do is they hire a service provider then that sends out phishing emails to their employees to train them how to identify. Is that a good solution?
Oh, 100%. I mean, but that's just part of the process, right? It's just like having an alarm system at your house. If you have an alarm system, doesn't mean you leave the back door unlocked, right? Doesn't mean you don't, make sure that you actually have, your curtains drawn and people can't look into your house. It's a variety of things that you have to do. And so phishing and testing your capabilities is a great option, but it's not the only thing. And I think that's what makes it so difficult for most companies is they don't have the resources, as James mentioned, in trying to figure out where do I put those finite resources. It's tough.
I would call that just part of awareness in general. I mean, the challenge with any kind of awareness training, even phishing training, is it's got a lifespan that's relatively short. Like training your users on the latest things that are out there is something that you have to do continuously. And so what kind of governance or program can you put in place to train? Because I would look at the phishing training and say that's something that you should do. You probably should have done it 5 or 10 years ago, but now the lifespan is even shorter. I mean, there's less and less that's going to happen on email in the next 20 years than the previous 20 years. And so how do you train your users on the next set of challenges that are out there? And one of the things that I think most organizations are having really tough grasping problems with is they have to look at security as a continuous program. Like, what does the program look like today? How is it going to mature? How is it going to evolve? You can't treat it like I can buy a product and it's fixed. It's not like database problems or web problems where I can buy the next thing and then forget about it for 3 to 5 years. It's much more of what's the program I can put in place? What are the resources that I have? And then how do I make sure I constantly evolve that program to address whatever the challenges are? Because the attacks will change. Attacks change every single week. Ransomware is hot. It wasn't hot 2 years ago. Right. And so what kind of programs can I put in place today to address this ransomware problem? For sure, 2 years from now, there'll be something different.
You were talking about ransomware. We were just talking about this backstage. WannaCry, that attack, that so far, whoever engineered that attack has not been able to take the money away out of it.
Yeah.
Why do you think they did it? And who did it? What was the cost of staging something like that? Because evidently the guys who did it didn't really think it through.
Oh, I would disagree with that. And so,
okay,
look,
tell me.
Yeah, so for every one big published type of ransomware attack you see out there, there's 1,000 that you don't see. And so for WannaCry to hit mainstream and everybody's heard about it, and oh my God, I've got like my computer's locked up and I need to pay to get access back, there's 1,000 variants out there now that hit small local businesses, medium-sized businesses, and the fines or the fees are so reasonable that you just pay it to get it back. And that's really the genius of this. The latest ransomware attacks have come in. They're treating it like an economic model to where it's almost cheaper just to pay the fine or pay the fee to get my system back than to pay all the money to try to secure it up front. $50 to get my laptop back? Okay, sounds good. And they've smarted, they've gotten really intelligent about the pricing side of this. It's not dissimilar to all the startups that are here trying to figure out their pricing models. And the ransomware business, pricing is key, right? If I have it too high, then they just say, go ahead, you can have the server, I'll get something new. If I have it too low, I don't make any money. And so they're constantly, A/B testing, what's the perfect price to charge for this ransomware? It's going to get smarter and smarter for sure.
At least I was told the money they were able to get, the money people gave them in Bitcoin, all these Bitcoins are still sitting in a wallet that they haven't been able to take it out because once they do, people are going to realize who they are. Is that true, Ron?
Well, what we're saying today is that actually I don't know what were their considerations, but actually the environment today actually makes it easier to sort of erase your traces and take your money without anybody noticing that what were the origin or the true origin of the money, especially when you talk about cryptocurrencies and others. But even with credit cards, even with payments, regular payments today, we live in an environment where anybody can cash out their criminal money very, very easily.
Which is the problem. Actually, a lot of startups in Hong Kong tell me that they go to a bank and want to open a bank account, and the bank basically comes back and say the amount of money and resources we have to dedicate in policing you, making sure you are not laundering money is so high, you're just not going to be a profitable client to me, which is why a lot of companies cannot open bank account. Is there a better way to do this?
So exactly, this is the same philosophy throughout banks across the world really led to the eruption of fintech, right? All the payment facilitators, all those payment organizations.
But not because fintech firms do this better.
Oh,
it's
no.
only because they're not subject to the same kind of scrutiny yet.
The economic reasoning for those companies to erupt was the banks wouldn't take those smaller accounts because of the high cost of the diligence processes. And they said, you know what, we're going to aggregate everybody, and we're going to be a single merchant to the bank. The bank was happy because they're getting all the revenues from all merchants, which together was a significant account. But the other end of it was that the heavy scrutiny of the due diligence were not applied on those small merchants. And so the combination of a now much more complex system with a huge data overload that created on the system really created a data smokescreen that allows any actor to smuggle into the payment system undetected with the rest of the good ones.
Okay. It's not a problem yet. Because regulators are not looking there, but eventually they will.
Absolutely. So we see this problem across the world. It's not, it didn't get the deserved attention from the regulators just yet. But what it really is, it's the evolution of money laundering into e-commerce. And money laundering is obviously a huge problem that the regulators are absolutely trying to deal with across different sectors of the financial industry. And that's going to get to the payments industry.
What are the tools available that people can employ in the future to, one, lower the compliance costs for banks, and two, for the payment companies and the fintechs to adopt as well?
Right. So the balance would be, so what happened was really a huge data problem, right? It's an overload of data and a complex system. So the way to solve it is really to apply, AI, machine learning, deep learning algorithms, basically data technology, in order to be able to, and utilize it in order to be able to identify those apples within.
Give me an example. These are very big words.
Yeah. The regular scenario would be that if I'm a drug dealer and I want to go to open a merchant account, I will go into the bank. They will reject me because I won't pass their KYC processes. With today's technology, it's going to be very, very easy for me to set up a different website, which would pretend to sell flowers or bicycles or anything legitimate. I would go through the KYC processes. I would then have my drugs website fully operational, collect the money on that website, and then going to funnel it through my legitimate website. So the bank, in today's environment, because, again, it's complex and it's going through a payment facilitator and they have lack of visibility of who is the underlying merchant at the end of the day, would not know that they're actually facilitating drug deals.
Right, but how does AI and machine learning help them identify that?
So we apply machine learning and AI and almost across every technological aspect in our technology, from being able to classify automatically, websites using AI, machine learning for text, images, and metadata, through applying machine learning on analyzing the transactional behavior on the merchant activity, through even applying machine learning for analyzing navigation patterns within the websites. And of course, you're going to have to apply a relevant business logic that would make sense and create value using all this data that's created. But it certainly creates value and helps to mitigate the risk.
Is that similar to what you guys employ in order to prevent hacking attacks?
The key thing is, as you just mentioned, no human could do that for hundreds of thousands of websites every day, right? I mean, that's what it boils down to. And so AI, machine learning, is helping automate a lot of that, right? The number of attacks, as James was mentioning, they're constantly changing. There's 1,000 ransomware attacks. How do you know this ransomware attack from another one that just started 5 minutes ago? You need those type of advanced approaches to be able to actually understand this is similar to something we've seen that's bad before, therefore this might be bad. And without those approaches, they're going to fly through the radar and fly, kind of somewhat be the, hiding in the noise.
Right. Foster, you were talking about social, because companies are on so many different social platforms now, and that risk is underappreciated?
I think it is. I think because it's moved so fast, it's still relatively new in terms of enterprise communication platforms. A lot of people think of social as still a consumer fabric right? I can look at the brands that I like, I can engage with organizations that I like, I can talk to my friends. But in the enterprise, it's still being adopted. We have not reached full maturation with the enterprise. 3 or 4 years ago, the people in the enterprise businesses were using it within marketing departments, right? Marketing wanted a Facebook page, or you wanted, a WeChat communication channel. You wanted to be able to communicate with those people buying or interested in your products or services. But now what you're seeing is multiple departments are leveraging social technology. You have recruiting departments and human resources using it to reach out and find new people to work for your organization. You've got people within your sales departments looking out, trying to push the product. You've got people within customer support and customer success listening to those people talking about your product, especially the ones that have problems, to try to make them happy customers again. And so as these different business units really start to mature, what you'll see is you'll see also a ramping and voluminous increase in attacks. Just like any other piece of enterprise technology, when enterprises adopt new tech, problems, security challenges, attacks, follow it.
Yes,
and
exactly
they've been doing
what
it for
happens.
20 years, 100% of the time. So,
Yeah, give me an example exactly what happens. So what's the typical profile of an attack that you guys have handled?
super simple. Very similar to email phishing attacks. Happens in the social side as well. More than 50% of the attacks in social today are phishing based. So it's not somebody sending a malicious file. It's not somebody sending something to download to kind of exploit you. It's what looks like a link. And we were talking about earlier, like, hey, phishing training important. It is on the email side, but 20 years ago, even 3 years ago, you were trained not to click on a link when you didn't know it went. So they say, read the link. If you don't know where it's going and you don't trust it, don't click on it. Well, there's no notion of that in social at all. The socials use bit shorteners, right? And so they take those links, they shorten them up.
You can't tell what it is.
You can't tell it at all. However, you've got a trusted platform from probably an organization or an individual that also you relatively trust, sending you something. My attack success rate is 70%. If I try to compromise you via social media, it's a 70% success rate.
I know what you're talking about because sometimes people send me links on Twitter, and I kind of expect Twitter to stop me
Right.
from going to that page if it was suspicious, but it actually does not do that.
That's right.
Right, okay.
Plain and simple.
I'm of this impression, and I can be wrong, that if someone's determined to hack you, someone's determined to attack you, they'll find a way.
Oh, for sure.
For sure.
So between cost and efficiency, what's the right amount of resources and companies should devote to this?
That's a hard question. I mean, it depends on what you're protecting, right? If you're a bank versus a startup maybe that only has information about your own product, it really depends, right? A lot of times it's regulatory driven instead of it being risk driven. But now we're starting to see with ransomware is a great example. They're no longer going after necessarily your data. They're just holding you hostage, right? So now everybody's a target for the same type of attack. Whereas before you had banks being a target because that's where the money was, or you had e-commerce websites because that's where the credit cards were. So now anybody is a target in that area. And also you've even seen with some of these new attacks, like when Target was hacked in the US a few years ago, it was a third party that was attacked.
Right.
They broke into the third party's company and then broke into Target. So they may come after you at your house because you work at a news agency and they want to break into the news agency. So they'll break into you first, wait till you go to work, and then use that to go in. So when you pick your resources, it's going to be based on what you're trying to protect. And a lot of companies, as we mentioned earlier, are underfunded. I mean, security is significantly underfunded. I do a report every year with a large news publication, and we ask the question, what's the number one thing you could do to improve your security? Every single enterprise says, get hacked. Because if we got hacked, then everybody would believe me that we're a target, right? And sadly, it's starting to become true.
And I think one of the things you'll see to drive those budgets and to get those hacks, I think you're going to see a compounding problem in the next few years. I think we're starting to see what I'll call attacks or hacks get democratized. And so what I mean by that is they're going to be smaller and there's going to be more of them.
Right.
And they're going to be something that seems consumable. And so with financial gain and motivation in mind, I'd rather attack 1,000 computers and ask for $100 each to get them back than try to target one of the largest banks in the world, hold their database and say, give me $1 million. Why? Because I don't set off any red flags by going small and increasing volume. And so the attack surface may not have changed massively, but I think these tactics are going to get smaller, more voluminous, and they're going to be, in theory, safer. And the challenge is, with an under the department right now, you're going to have to think about this problem differently because all of a sudden, you're in a situation now where you're asking for more funding and someone's going to go, well, we were just breached last year. We had to pay $200 to get a computer back.
Right.
Not a big deal. I'll cut security again. That you're creating a problem that's only going to get bigger with time.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that's the same kind of notion is we see it in fraud as well. So if you want to launder money a few years ago, you had to buy a big business or asset and run it and hire the people and so forth. Whereas today, with e-commerce and the reality we live in, you set up all those small businesses. It's not going to cost you anything, and you go radar because it's much, much harder to detect. So that's the same sort of notion applied to money laundering as well.
If you're going to talk about higher frequency, lower cost, that sounds like it's becoming a known risk as opposed to a risk. And the traditional way of dealing with a known risk is just to buy an insurance. Is there a like that out there? Is that a solution?
Yeah, cyber insurance in the United States at least is growing rapidly. We're talking massive millions and millions and millions of dollars now being spent on it because it's becoming a quantifiable risk. It used to be categorized as an act of God under most insurance policies, but being hacked is no longer an act of God. It happens every day. So you can buy an insurance policy, but right now the insurance companies aren't paying them. So even though you can buy them, there's very few that are paying out and actually giving you the money because they find a flaw in your security. They say, you told us you were doing X, we found out you were doing Y, and we're not going to give you money.
That's the takeaway. I mean, when you have a nascent industry such as the cyber insurance industry, they're trying to figure out this as well. And long term, they know they have to have payouts. Because if you don't have payouts, then people stop buying insurance, plain and simple. But it's really hard to govern what you should be doing to minimize that risk of insurance. And so they have a program that says, great, we'll sell you this policy, and if you just do these 4,000 things, then you shouldn't be breached and everything should be fine. And you look at it, you're like, well, this is going to cost me more than the insurance policy. And they said, well, yeah, that's right. But if you do these things, we feel like we could be able to pay you out if something bad still does happen.
All right.
Still learning from each other.
All right, something to work on. Great. Thank you guys so much. That's all we've got time for. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.